How would you describe your experience in Saigon in one word?
Bustling. Just the amount of people that are all like moving in and out and everywhere, and it's kind of I think the reason why you call it like a sea of people is like when a boat goes through water, there's a wake, and then there's kind of like weird little things that happen, like eddies and waves that happen after, like behind you when you get through. And I just feel like the entire time I was in Saigon, it was kind of like that. There's just like people and everybody's just kind of going on, and there's wave dynamics and just masses of people.
I mean, it was fascinating to watch
out.
Everything weaving in. Yeah, just people weaving through. Do you remember any specific thing we did in the city itself?
And we're going to that temple and seeing all the huge turtles.
Oh yeah, that was fun. The turtles were so cute.
They're huge.
Yeah, and the temple itself was pretty interesting. It was strange because we were wandering around the streets for a pretty long time before we finally saw it, and it looked like it was just super integrated into the city, because you're like, there's no way we can miss this temple. It's a temple, it's gonna have pagodas and everything, but like we walked past it so many times before we realized where it was. What were your favorite meals that you had?
I think that first morning that we had, we actually had it for breakfast, so it was my first time having pho for its intended
traditional
meal.
Breakfast.
Yep.
Yep.
And then probably my favorite, most memorable, is when we went to that park to get that little meal that costed like 50 cents or whatever it costed.
It was a papaya salad.
Yeah, papaya salad. That was so good.
We walked around the park for a while before we found her, and when we did, it was kind of a strange moment where it clicked that all of these little plastic
seat mats,
mats. People would just sit on the mats and eat their little plates of papaya salad, and it's delicious. So on the second day we were in Saigon, we went to the Kuchi tunnels. The tunnels it's like this network of tunnels that the North Vietnamese had built over many, many years in order to carry out guerrilla warfare with the Americans and the Vietnamese folks who were fighting for democracy against communism.
So Saigon was a bustling democratic city on the southern side, and so it was gaining a lot of power from being a little bit more globalized, seeing a lot more trade. And apparently the North Vietnamese had been kind of seeing this coming for a long time, because some of the signs that they were saying around the tunnels is that they'd been building these tunnels for 20 years.
Yeah.
This entire miles upon miles network, like this honeycomb.
It was ginormous, and I think we only saw a section of it.
Yeah, very small section.
It was a very small area.
We saw examples.
But like we would see these really intricate small tunnels that would drop into these giant rooms for conferences or meals, and they were huge, and they were made for living in.
I think the tour guide was young enough, and obviously we're all young enough, that we weren't alive during the time of the war.
Right.
But it was kind of interesting because it's like kind of the way they were just casually bragging about killing Americans.
I know the perspective of what I learned in American schools, and I know the perspective of the stories my dad told me, right? And now I have the additional perspective of what children were being taught about the war in Vietnam. So we have these three different perspectives, and I feel like none of them really match up, and I don't think any of them are fully accurate. I think the American version paints Vietnamese people in a way that's a bit unfair.
Oh yeah.
And paints the situation in a really very obviously biased way. And then you look at the way that tour guide was retelling the war stories, and we're like, that's not how that went either. I think what's interesting about the experience was realizing that history is so incredibly biased, and it's really hard to understand what actually happened.
It was just kind of interesting how you understand how war can happen a little bit more after that kind of conversation, where you have your skewed, biased view given down from on high, and then they have theirs given on from their whatever authority. obviously there's a lot of common ground in terms of the way we think and a lot of and how we talk or whatever. But for some reason we just have this different, like now it manifests in the fact that we just have this different historical view of whatever. But at the time it could be as much as we want to kill each other.
Like
at the
an
time.
Ideological difference.
Yeah, it's just crazy how that.
Yeah. So that was Saigon. We spent, I think it was 2 days there before we headed over to Hanoi.